Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of KFFB's Open Mic program. All this week, we're going to be talking about severe weather awareness, and we do have Dennis Cavanaugh with the National Weather Service office in Little Rock, the warning coordinator meteorologist. That's a mouthful, Dennis.
That is, you're right.
We got to really talk about a lot of things. This whole week, we're going to be talking about different things with the Weather Service and different warning areas and all the different safety features that you guys have in place as well. And one thing we want to talk about is flooding. This is something that I say on the radio. It seems like every time there's severe weather, there's heavy downpours, and we say, turn around, don't drown. And it is something, it seems very elementary, but so many people do not yield to that.
Yeah, that's true. And, flooding is the number one killer. And it's really sad because, when tornadoes strike, that's just tragic because you can't really get out of the way of a tornado. If you're in your home and a tornado strikes, you just get the damage. But a flood, most people die in floods because they see the flood and they could totally avoid it if they just turned around, but they drive into it on purpose, usually because they think they're very confident in their driving skills. They're overconfident in what their vehicle can handle. Like they think their 4x4 can make it through anything, and it can't. And once you get in water, the water is extremely powerful. If that water's moving, it's going to wash you off the road, and then your vehicle's not a boat. It's going to sink, and it'll tend to sink from the front down because the engine's heavier. That puts your cab where you're sitting under the water first, and then you're stuck. You can't open the windows, the doors. You're just waiting as the vehicle fills up with water, and then if you can't get out, that's it. That's how people become casualties in flash floods, usually because of bad decision making.
Now, what's the difference between floods and flash floods for our listeners?
Sure. So a flood is usually a slower evolving situation. So like we had last year with the Arkansas River flooding, the record river flooding, we knew that was coming 5 and 6 days in advance. We knew there was just a huge surge of water coming out of Oklahoma. We knew that was going to eventually flood that river system. It's the same with the White and Black rivers and the Buffalo River, up here closer to home here as well. But basically, that's a slower evolving flood. We know the water is eventually going to flood an area, but it might not happen for, 18 or 24 hours. Flash flood, on the other hand, is something that occurs very quickly. So those floodwaters rise in a matter of 30 minutes to an hour. So the flood doesn't last as long, but it's there and it's gone real quick. Usually when people get washed away, it's because they're driving over a low water crossing. They quickly filled up with water. They're used to driving it, so they think they're safe, and that's when they get washed downstream.
So that's something we got to be aware of when we said there's flash flood or flooding.
Yes.
Be aware of it. And that's something you guys do alerts on that all the time as well.
We do, yeah. And flash flood warnings typically are more severe than flood warnings because flood warnings give you lots of time to prepare, move stuff out of the low-lying areas. A flash flood happens rapidly. So that's when you've got to take action right away. And sometimes it's just know to avoid those low water crossings. If you happen to live in a very low-lying area, you might actually have to move to higher ground. It's especially dangerous for campers, especially in hilly terrain. Once you get into the Ozarks and Ouachitas, if you happen to be camping, the canyons or the little valleys in between the hills can fill up with water really quick, and you don't want your tent to get washed downstream, when you were just out there camping. So we've had that kind of tragedy as well. That was the Albert Pike flooding of almost 10 years ago, I think.
And that was a very tragic situation that happened there as well.
That was.
Well, coming up tomorrow, we're going to be talking about lightning. Later in the week, we're going to talk about tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, watches, and warnings. All that's going to be coming up this week as we take time out with you and me talking about severe weather.
Sounds great, Bob.
And remember, you can find this at kffb.com and also on our YouTube channel.